Hello everybody, and welcome back to another video. In today's video, I'll be giving an updated state of the race for the 2024 presidential election. It's only been, I think, around 2 weeks since I did my most recent election prediction nationally, but I want to do this again because we just had a very, very important debate last Thursday, and I don't think there has been a time up to this point where we have more discourse regarding this presidential election. There's so much to unpack, so I'm just going to get right into it here again. I try to make these videos at least 3, 4, 5 times a week, so subscribing means a great deal to me. I'm a small channel. I'm one person running this channel, so any like, comment, or subscription that really helps me out. But so if you do that, great. But I want to get into this video because I have so much to say and there's so much to unpack about what is quickly becoming an incredibly complicated race. So the first thing I want to say is that I'm recording this on Sunday morning. There are genuine reasons to believe that there is at least speculation among leading Democratic strategists and politicians relating to Joe Biden dropping out of the race. Now, does that mean that Joe Biden will not be the Democratic nominee, that he will not be on the ballot in November? I don't think so. I am 90% sure that Biden will be the nominee. Now, there's still a 10%, room for error, but I am still very confident Biden will be the Democratic nominee. And that's for two main reasons. The first is that we already had the primary, and Biden won that primary decisively. And the second is that just logistically, it is so hard to replace a candidate in June, right? Like, think about the problems Democrats would have with ballot access, for example, or even fundraising, or just organization at a local level. Maybe there are people who want to work for Joe Biden, but wouldn't work for, say, Kamala Harris, or whether it be Gavin Newsom or Gretchen Whitmer, whoever Democrats would choose to replace Biden leading the ticket. So there would be a lot of logistical challenges that Democrats have to deal with. And there are rumors that Biden, is going to talk to the First Lady Jill Biden and that she has kind of the ultimate say on whether or not he should run. I would be very surprised if he comes back and says, I'm dropping out of the race. That would be shocking to me. Now, here is what I will say. This prediction will be based off of the assumption that Biden is running and that he is the nominee and is on the ballot on November 5th. If that changes, I'll do an immediate update. With that said, let's get started here. So for Joe Biden, we're going to begin with his safe states, and these aren't really going to change too much. I'm keeping most of the states that I had here beforehand. I'll be talking a little bit in terms of margin, just moving some states down. But for the most part, this is going to be a pretty similar prediction, at least for the safe states, what you're normally going to get. I'll put Oregon in the likely column because I think Biden will win it by less than 15. I'll also put New Jersey there because I think that's a state where the polling has been rather close. There's actually some hype around Trump actually winning New Jersey because of one poll that came out with like 20% undecided that had him up by 1%. I don't think much of that, but I would expect this state to narrow up a little bit. Biden won it by 15 points in 2020. Maybe he wins it by 10 this time. So that's what I have to say about New Jersey. And then for Donald Trump, just to get into his safe states, kind of for the same reasons as Biden, I'm going to put Nebraska one in likely, or I don't even know if it'll be below 15, but I think Kansas will probably be below 15, but it's not really worth talking about. Same with Alaska. And so once you add in these states, that's going to get Trump up to 131 electoral votes. I'll also throw in Maine 2nd District because at this point, Biden's not contesting it, and this district has been zooming right in recent years, and Trump won it by 7% in 2020. Could be up to a 10, 12-point margin for him come November of this year. So that's 132 electoral votes for Trump, 191 for Joe Biden to start out. And now we can get into the swing states. And so the first thing I want everyone to understand is that since the debate, we've seen a bit of a shift towards Trump. It's a small one. On June 27th, Trump was up by 0.2. He's now up by 1%. So in the few polls that have been released since the debate, there's been about a swing of a point nationally towards Trump, which is not insignificant, by the way. 1% nationally is hundreds of, actually millions of votes. Really, it's over 1 million votes. So it's important. And if that 1% nationally affects swing states like Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Arizona, Georgia, you name it, that could literally swing the election. But what matters more to me is the swings in the polls. So a Morning Consult had a 1-point swing towards Biden, which I found kind of surprising. But other polls like Survey USA showed Trump doing better We also had a poll from Ledger, which had Trump up by 7 points or by 8 points nationally, I believe, in their in one of their polls in which they pushed undecideds, but on 538 it's not up here for whatever reason. But either way, he's up by 7 in the poll they did more recently, and he was up by 8 when they pushed undecided. So that, again, down 7, down 8 nationally for Biden, very bad sign, even if that's just one poll. And again, the Ledger poll that had him up by 7/8 came out the day after the debate. So there have been swings nationally towards Biden, and we have to remember that Biden won the popular vote by 4.5 points in 2020, and that for him to have lost the election, for him to have won the election, he would have had to win it by at least roughly 3.3% in 2020. Now, the good news for Democrats is that there has been a kind of shift in the Electoral College bias, because Democrats are now winning. Like, the reason Democrats in 2016 and 2020 did better on the popular vote than they did the Electoral College was because not swing states, big blue states like California, New York, Massachusetts, were netting huge margins for Democrats, throw in Illinois. But since then, all of those states have trended towards Republicans, and so Democrats are winning California by maybe 20 instead of 26, which isn't that big of a difference. California is still a deeply blue state, but again, a 26-point margin, like a 6-point swing in California, a state that casts in 2020 nearly 11 million votes. 6% of 11 million is a good amount of votes. That is, roughly like 60, 70, or I think 55, 65,000 votes. Could be super wrong on that. My mental math is not good when I'm tired. But again, you add those up, add those swings up across. New York was even, like a 15-point swing towards Republicans in 2022. So add those swings up and you get hundreds of thousands of votes, the Democrats are losing in those blue states. So the delta between the Electoral College and the popular vote is getting a heck of a lot smaller. And in this case, that's good for Democrats because if, in 2020, if Biden won the popular vote by 3%, he could have lost the election. This year, if he wins it by 3, I think he'd win the election, not comfortably, but by a good amount. I think the tipping point is kind of Biden winning the election Biden winning the popular vote by 1.5, maybe 2%, maybe like a Hillary Clinton margin of 2.4%. That could be kind of the gray area where Biden could win, but he also could lose. So again, how the popular vote corresponds to the Electoral College, that matters a good amount. And this year, the trend is in favor of the Democrats, whereas in 2020 and 2016, Republicans are doing better. And then, you go back to 2012, where the trend favored Democrats because, again, Obama only won the popular vote by like 3%. And he won the Electoral College in not a landslide, but pretty decisively. It wasn't very close. So keep that in mind. But let's get into the more competitive states here. So start with the likely Biden states. I think the only two I'm going to see here are going to be New Mexico and New Hampshire. New Mexico, I think, could be a problem for Biden, but we don't have any polling that would indicate it is yet, so I'll just keep it in the likely column. But if we get, 2 or 3 polls that show this race close, I'm happy to move it down to lean. But in 2022, Republicans didn't really do all that well here, so there's no, real evidence, there's no tangible evidence I can give from the past 4 years that actually has New Mexico in play for Trump. New Hampshire is interesting because this is a state that in 2016 was very close. In 2020, it was closer than states like New Jersey or Virginia. 7-point margin for Biden in New Hampshire, 15-point margin in New Jersey, 16-point actually, 10-point in Virginia. New Hampshire's got no attention from Trump. He's not really focused on New Hampshire. And then, that's Biden at 200. And now for Trump's likely states, I think the main one here is Ohio. Ohio is really interesting because there is a Senate race there that's very competitive. The Democrats have a real shot at, with incumbent Sherrod Brown running for re-election. But for the time being, I don't think this race is competitive presidentially. So in 2020, just to kind of go to this map here, Biden lost Ohio by 8 points, and that was while he had a decent turnout, relatively decent turnout in Cleveland and Columbus. This year, I would expect turnout to drop all across the board, but Democrats are going to really struggle, as the polls have indicated, with Black voters, Hispanic voters, and younger voters. Cleveland itself is a city where Democrats are heavily dependent on Black turnout. Columbus is a city where Democrats depend on both Black turnout and youth turnout. Columbus is a younger city. So there are a lot of really interesting dynamics at play within those urban areas in Ohio. And if the polls are even, half right, Biden will fall a lot in those urban areas. Trump might see a bit of a turnout drop in rural areas, but again, That doesn't necessarily mean too much because I think the turnout drop will be a lot less than comparably to the ones you're going to see in the cities. That's going to hurt Biden in a more meaningful way. I think Ohio could be around a 10-point margin for Trump this year. And if Trump actually does win it by 10, I think Sherrod Brown will probably lose re-election for what it's worth. And then Florida, obviously, state that was once kind of like Ohio, a swing state. Now in the, pretty likely to solid GOP column, I don't have a lot to say about Florida. There's been some hype around Biden being competitive here just because of one focus group after the debate that, Univision sponsored a group of, 30 or so Hispanic voters, I think, in South Florida, and they said Biden won the debate. And that got a lot of discourse because everyone thought Trump won the debate. I thought Trump won the debate. I thought it was pretty clear Trump won the debate. There were a few focus groups, like one in Michigan that had Biden winning, one in Florida that had Biden winning. And those are important, but like broadly, the national sentiment was that Biden lost by a lot. And the CNN Snap poll from after the debate surveyed the whole country, and 67% of voters thought Trump won. So I'm comfortable maintaining that Biden did win that debate. Regardless, despite the talk about Florida, it will stay red. I'm very sure in that. We don't actually have any good polls for Biden here yet. The state's party registration data favors Republicans. The fact that we have seen Republicans do well here time and time again. Democrats haven't won a federal race here since 2012. They haven't won a statewide race here since 2018. The state will go red. So let's now get into the more competitive states here. Texas is what I want to talk about. Texas is to me kind of a different tier than Ohio or Florida, but it's not quite lean. I think Trump won it by, just 5%, very, kind of very similar to 2020, maybe a tiny bit less. Texas is definitely left trending. And this is a thing a lot of people forget because Democrats didn't do that well here in 2022. They did fine, but they didn't, it wasn't like the governorship was close. It wasn't like we saw any like real shift towards Democrats here. But this is still a left trending state, and this doesn't get attention anymore. But in 2020, Biden, people forget this, but in 2020 in Texas, Biden did very well in Dallas, Fort Worth, and in Austin. You look at these shifts in really big counties, 6-point swing towards Biden in Dallas, 9% swing towards Biden in Tarrant, which is where Fort Worth is. These counties in the north, Collin, 12%, Denton, 12%. Go to Travis County, which is where Austin is, 6.5-point swing, 11-point swing in Williamson. So in the metro areas, Biden did very well, and I think he'll continue that. Obviously, I think he'll have some problems in the rural areas, and especially with Hispanic voters in the South, if you believe the polls, which show Trump doing a lot better with Hispanic voters. I think for now, Texas will be around a 5-point margin for Biden, but don't be surprised if it's closer than you think. Biden is in a lot of trouble nationwide, and I think I've talked a lot about that. I think I'm, pretty clearly, transparent about that fact. But Texas, to me, is a state where Biden, I'd be shocked if he wins it, but there's like a real chance this state is closer than people think, like a 3 or 4 point margin maybe, and on a good night for Biden. I think the median outcome is maybe a 5-point win for Trump, though. Now going into the lean Biden states, just kind of bang these out here. There's two obvious ones. I think Maine and Virginia should go here. I'm moving Virginia down out of an abundance of caution. I don't think it's competitive. I think that Virginia is getting a lot of attention from Trump because he thinks he can actually win it. Because in 2021, Glenn Youngkin won, and there's been some polling that's been good for him in this state. I don't think that Trump actually has a chance here. It is a left-trending state. When you look at the 2020 map in Virginia, it's not a map that screams, Republicans can claw back. Trump lost the state by 450,000 votes in 2020. He lost it by over 10 points. And he lost because he did so poorly in these suburbs outside of D.C., which are massive. These are once, Bush voting suburbs, deeply Democratic now because you have college-educated voters moving in from all over the country. A lot of people are moving to D.C. A lot of people are moving to the suburbs of D.C. as well. And they're coming from, very progressive areas like San Francisco, New York City, Chicago, a lot of educated voters who are Democrats raising families in this area. And that is making the state fundamentally change. Virginia is no longer kind of this southern, this is more a cultural thing, but 30 years ago, Virginia was still deeply southern. Even, an hour south of D.C., deeply southern. An hour south of D.C. now, you're in blue suburbs. So the state has culturally changed. I know Republicans had a good 2021 here, but in 2023, they lost a lot of the gains they made in 2021. And broadly, Joe Biden is a good candidate for this state. So I think he wins it by maybe 5, maybe 6. I think if we're still here in 2 months, I might put it back in likely, but 4.5 months away, if things do get worse for Biden, I could see it narrowing up, but I'd be shocked if Trump actually wins it. And then for Maine, it's just a margin thing. It's again, margin and caution, kind of like Virginia. We don't actually have a lot of hype for Trump in Maine, but the state is very white. It swung a lot towards Trump initially in 2016, and if Trump does really well with white voters this year, as some are suggesting, And if we see another kind of northeastern swing away from Biden, the way we saw from Hillary Clinton in 2016, Maine would be under a 5-point margin. Now, to go over to our final lean state, this one's a bit less obvious. I think Minnesota's in that category. A lot of people really have been thinking Trump is going to be competitive here and make a play for Minnesota. He's kind of talked about making a play for Virginia, New Jersey, and even New York. He hasn't done the same thing for Minnesota. We have had some close polls, but at the end of the day, we had some close polls in 2020. We had some close polls in 2022. I do not think that this race will be very close when it's all said and done. Biden should win Minnesota by 4 to 5. Should be fine. He will do a bit worse than 2020 just because I expect the rural areas to zoom towards Trump. And when I say zoom, I do mean that literally. I think we could see 10, 15-point swings towards Trump in rural Minnesota. The problem for him is that rural Minnesota is not that big, not that many votes in the rural part of the state. Most of the state's electorate is concentrated in Minneapolis or St. Paul, and those two cities will still favor Biden by a considerable amount, enough to win the state. Now, to go over to our lean Trump states here, let's talk about them. To me, the most obvious one is North Carolina. This state was a year ago on the board for Biden. I think right now it's not really. There have been reports that the campaign thinks it's in play. Obviously, Democrats have really wanted to win North Carolina for a decade now, ever since Obama flipped it originally in 2008. The problem for Democrats here is that there's still room for Trump to grow in the rural part of the state. And again, North Carolina is a big state, and winning over big states is hard. Democrats, didn't really have a problem turning Colorado from a red state to a blue state in 20 years because Colorado is 60% as populated as North Carolina, if that. But the reason states like North Carolina are harder to flip or Texas are harder to flip is that you have so many big red areas that just haven't cracked yet. And Democrats still have, a lot of room to fall in these rural areas. So rural North Carolina, I think, will be a bloodbath for Biden this year, even more than it was in 2020. Go to the northern blue counties, a lot of black voters there. They swung towards Trump in 2020. I think that could be another problem for Biden, especially because the polls do have him lagging with black voters. And then, go over to the cities where Biden actually got decent turnout out of Charlotte, Raleigh, and Durham in 2020. It was sufficient. Again, based on the polls, we have a lot of enthusiasm problems for Biden with black voters, especially in more conservative states like North Carolina, which is a Republican-leaning state. I think that, Biden could win North Carolina. He has a path. I could again, I always say this, I could draw a map where Biden wins, but for every outcome that Biden, for every map I can draw with Biden winning, I can make 5 for Trump winning. So is it possible? Yeah, it's not a safe red state, but just the math is not good for Biden. And I just think if you ran this election 10 times, Biden would win it only 2, maybe 3 times. So for that reason, Trump, the favorite in North Carolina. Now, there's one more state I'm going to put in the lean column here for Republicans, and this is a controversial one, but I think Nevada at this point is in the lean column for the GOP. Look, this state to me is concerning for Democrats. I've talked about Nevada going red for months now. I think those of you who've watched my prediction videos recently will know, how I feel broadly about this state. I think Biden is really, really struggling here, just based on what the polls have. The polls, he hasn't led in a poll in Nevada in a while. And again, the problem for Biden here is that the entirety of the Democratic coalition here, I shouldn't say the entirety, because, go to Reno, there's a lot of progressive voters there who are going to back Biden. But go to Las Vegas. The Democratic base there that gave Biden the narrow victory in 2020 voted for Catherine Cortez Masto in 2022 and voted for Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama during the early 2010s. That base is eroding. Again, Las Vegas is a very diverse city, which, diversity usually bodes well for Democrats because they do well with, black voters, Asian voters, Hispanic voters, generally cities that are more racially diverse and not just, 90% white. Those are better for Democrats. That's been true about Vegas, and that's why Vegas will continue to vote blue. The problem is that, again, if you believe the polls, and the polls don't have to be fully right, but as long as there's even a minor swing towards Trump with black voters or Hispanic voters or Asian voters, that'll be a swing against Biden in Las Vegas. Because again, this city, not a lot of, the majority of the population in Las Vegas works in service, not a lot of college education, right? To work, in a casino or work on the Vegas Strip, you don't need a college degree. And again, this is why culture is, very important in discussing elections, right? Like if you are a working class Hispanic voter in Las Vegas who doesn't have a college degree, just based on the polls, you were more likely to swing towards Trump than most other groups because you're working class, not college educated, and you're Hispanic. And those are three demographics that Trump has done exceedingly well with. And in 2020, working class, non-college educated Hispanic voters, three demographics that swung towards Trump. And again, in the polls, they're predicting a swing towards Trump again with that demographic. And that's, Las Vegas. I don't think there's a better city in this country that represents that in Las Vegas. So Biden, he won it last time. I wouldn't be shocked if he won Nevada, but I think that right now, when you just look at all the data we have regarding how these demographics are going to vote, Nevada looks like a disaster waiting to happen for Biden. So that's why I expected to vote for Trump. I kind of think that's it for my lean Trump states. I don't have any lean Biden states. The rest of these states are kind of functional toss-ups. But for now, I'm going to go from least close to closest. I think Trump's pretty clearly favored in Wisconsin at this point. Again, he lost it by 0.6. He lost it by 21,000 votes in 2020. And that's really not a lot, considering the fact that he won it by a similar amount in 2016, and we had higher turnout in 2020. So as a percentage, Trump won Wisconsin in 2016 by more than he lost it by in 2020, which I think a lot of people forget. And Republicans also have kind of eroded support in Michigan and Pennsylvania over the past 8 years. Again, they haven't won statewide races they haven't won federal races in Michigan or Pennsylvania since 2016. But in Wisconsin in 2022, they did win a Senate race, so there's kind of that factor going in favor of them. Also, I just think broadly Wisconsin bodes well for Trump because it's very rural, very white, and fundamentally a lot more conservative than the other Midwestern states that we're going to talk about in a second here, like Michigan, Pennsylvania. So the thing with Wisconsin is that the rural areas are still getting better for Republicans. Most of them, kind of swung, either way by under 2 or 3 points in 2020. And so what that means is that there is a lot of area for Trump to improve, which if you believe the polls, and even if the polls are only half right, Trump will improve. And then, go to the WOW counties where Biden did pretty well in 2020. We saw 6-point swing in Waukesha, 2-point swing in Washington, 7-point swing in Ozaukee. These are counties that Republicans have historically done very well in, that Biden kind of cut into the margins in by a good amount in 2020. I would expect these counties to actually kind of stay stagnant, if anything, swing towards Trump, because they're not normal suburbs. Like suburbs in Atlanta or in, Virginia or in even Arizona or North Carolina that are swinging towards Democrats so consistently over the course of the past decade, they're diversifying, right? Go to any county outside of Atlanta. 30 years ago, it was, almost exclusively white. And it's got, they've all gotten more diverse. And I think Gwinnett County actually went from 90% white in the 80s, to I think only 35% white now. And again, just to be clear, there are a lot of people who, use the statistics as evidence for racist conspiracy theories. I'm definitely not doing that here. I broadly think diversity is a good thing. And I think that when you have neighborhoods that are over 90% white that are, products of segregation from, 70, 80 years ago, it is a bad thing. I am glad for the, just so I can, make this very clear, because I really am uncomfortable with people who use those things to form conspiracy theories. I am very glad that there has been an uptick in diversity, especially in the South, in terms of these suburbs, because these suburbs were once very different. But just to get back to the politics of it, when you have these suburbs getting more diverse and getting less white, that bodes well for Democrats, because again, diversity equals larger share of votes for Democrats. Now, in the WOW counties, they're still mostly white. They haven't changed too much over the past 20, 30 years. They've gotten maybe a bit less white, but not by a lot. The reason Democrats or Biden did well here in 2020 is because enough Republican voters switched to him. And I think this time turnout will be down, and that will genuinely harm Biden with that type of voter who, maybe gave him the hesitant vote in 2020, didn't like his administration at all, is now going to, maybe not vote or even switch back to Trump. So I think Wisconsin is a clear state where it's close, but I think Trump, I'd rather be him by a good amount here right now. Georgia's also one where I think it's closer than people think. Maybe a lot of people think that Biden is kind of, done for in Georgia. I think it's still a very close race. Again, the suburbs are getting bluer, and there is a path for Biden to win Georgia because a lot of the Trump electorate is low propensity rural white voters who in a low turnout election might not turn out. But broadly speaking, Trump's the favorite here. Biden hasn't led a poll here in a year and a half. Black turnout in the city of Atlanta is a major concern for Democrats because, again, the polls indicate a lack of energy for Democrats with black voters. In most recent special elections, we see Democrats struggle with turnout. And just, broadly speaking, Biden's not a popular president, and I haven't touched on this yet, but Biden has like a 38% approval rating right now, so he doesn't, really generate a lot of enthusiasm. And presidents with low approval ratings usually don't win, right? Like, ask Donald Trump that. He had like a 42% approval rating on election day. Biden's is 4% lower than that. If Biden got up to a 42% approval rating on election day, I think that would be a miracle, being frank here. So there's a lack of enthusiasm for Biden. I think in a state like Georgia, where Democrats have a relatively high floor, but also a lower ceiling, just because the base is very, strong for them in states like Georgia, because you have a lot of black voters, a lot of young voters, a lot of progressive voters in the city of Atlanta. That kind of minimizes the losses, but it also makes it infinitely more likely that you lose a close race. So that's why I think Biden would lose Georgia right now, and potentially by up to 2 or 3 points. So let's now get into Arizona. I expect Biden to win Arizona still. This is kind of an unpopular opinion. I know a lot of people really like Trump to win Arizona. I am still not confident, but I still feel comfortable with Biden winning it. And that's mostly because, again, when you look at the 2022 elections, Democrats won all but one statewide race here, and they won most of them by good amounts. They won the Senate race by 5, the Secretary of State race by 5. Katie Hobbs absolutely should have lost the governorship. She was down by 4 or 5 points in every poll. She won by around 0.6%, which is no landslide, but the fact that she even won was impressive. And the electorate was still pretty conservative in Arizona in 2022. We had evidence that was a Trump voting electorate, and they just still voted for Democrats. So there is a leftward trend in Arizona that's pretty significant. Maricopa County casts like 60% of the state's votes, roughly, and it's swinging blue. And that is enough to offset any losses for Trump or any losses for Biden in the other part, in the remaining parts of the state, because Maricopa itself accounts for, much more than the rest of the state. So that's probably why I think Biden wins Arizona. To me, Arizona is a simple state. It's not too complicated. It's mostly, what happens in Maricopa County kind of dictates what happens in the rest of the state. And that will probably be enough to give Biden the victory, even if it's closer than he might like. So the election's going to come down to Michigan and Pennsylvania. And if Trump wins either one of these, for my prediction, he'll be the president. I think, to be clear, Rust Belt states usually vote together, so I'm going to give them both to Trump as of right now. Again, this is subject to change. It's June, so this is not me declaring that I forgot to fill in this a while ago. This should be in the likely Biden column. Silly me. So this is not like my declaration that Trump is guaranteed to be the president come January 2025, but I think right now he's the clear favorite. And just to talk about Michigan and Pennsylvania kind of broadly here, because I'm going to group them together because they're very similar states. They're Rust Belt. They voted for Trump in 2016, returned back to their kind of Democratic blood in 2020, and 2024 I think will be a defining moment for them. These are two states where Republicans have really not done well for the past 8 years, and Democrats in 2022 really, really outperformed expectations. They won a very important Senate race in Pennsylvania, and in both the governor races in these states, Democrats won by double digits. So Republicans haven't done anything here for the past 8 years. They've been really bad in both of these states. But the thing with Trump is that Trump brings out a very high, a high floor for Republicans. Trump in 2020 got 49% of the vote in Pennsylvania, 49%. So he came very close to winning the state. And I think we can all agree that 2024 is shaping out to be a lot better of an environment for Trump than 2020 was. He's more popular than he was in 2020. The polls are better for him. Biden is a lot less popular. And so just based off the fundamentals alone, you kind of expect Trump to gain in Pennsylvania. And it isn't like he lost Pennsylvania by 7 points last time. He lost it by 1. He lost Michigan by, 2.8. So these are two states where he obviously he lost them in 2020, but not by enough to kind of make it insurmountable. Just based on the fundamentals alone, I think that gives Trump the advantage. The polls in both these states have been very close. Michigan, the polls kind of been back and forth with Trump having the advantage right now. Pennsylvania, they've kind of all been the same, where Trump narrowly leads, but both states are within the margin of error, so a minor pro-Democratic polling error would put Biden ahead. But I'm comfortable saying that Democrats, or Biden at least, is the underdog in both these states. There are areas where I think he'll improve. I think in Pennsylvania he'll probably do well in the Pittsburgh collar and in the Philadelphia collar. Those are the suburban areas. I think he'll do well in Grand Rapids and North Detroit, or the suburbs north of Detroit. But beyond that, I think the rest of these states are going to swing towards Trump. And I would expect Philadelphia and Detroit metro area, and Detroit city proper, to see significant decreases in turnout. And in a close race, I think Michigan could come down to 0.2%, for example. So turnout really matters. And in 2016, arguably Hillary Clinton lost Michigan because there was a rainstorm in Detroit. She lost Michigan by, I think, 12,000 votes. And, Detroit's a city that in 2020, just to kind of, again, show you the numbers here, in 2020, Detroit in total cast, roughly 860,000 votes. So 12,000 votes out of 860, or 2016 was different from 2020. It was less turnout, but like 12,000 votes in a city of well over, I think almost 2 million people that cast almost 1 million votes in 2020. So turnout really matters here. And I would genuinely be pretty surprised if Michigan in particular isn't within, 0.5 points either way. So I think right now Trump is favored. For those reasons, I kind of went in depth, but now I'm going to give you my main reasons nationally. First of all, the debate bump is real. We still, again, major event bumps kind of take a bit to materialize. So, for example, the Dobbs bump kind of took about a month to materialize for Democrats. It's been like 3 days since the debate, and we're already seeing minor shift towards Trump. I think in the coming 2 to 3 weeks, it'll be really important. If I'm right, and if Trump does continue to improve in the polls, that will likely bode well for him as well. So, those are like that's kind of I think where we are right now. Biden definitely can still win, but he's in a lot of trouble. Genuinely, I think Democrats have put themselves in a really bad position here, nominating Biden. A year ago, I said that Biden, in terms of electability, was not the best choice because of his age. And I think that the debate on Thursday night really reinforced that and hammered that in for a lot of American voters. So, again, like I said, I'll say it again. Biden can win. I would not be shocked if we get to November and I predict him to win, just because maybe things get a little better, maybe the polls get a little better for him, maybe Trump gets worse. But right now, if it were held, tomorrow or this week, I think this is the map you'd get. So let me know what you think. Let me know what you're expecting. And as always, I'll see you all in the next one.